I bought a workshop HOA ordered demolished. Now they're demolishing their own careers. The smell of motor oil and steel dust. That's what home smells like to me. Has since I was 5 years old, sitting on an overturned bucket watching my father rebuild a 1972 Harley shovelhead with nothing but hand tools and stubborn Italian determination. That morning, the morning everything changed, I was elbow deep in a custom Softdale build for a client from Texas when I heard the gravel crunch outside my shop. 3 vehicles, too smooth, too synchronized, not customers. I wiped my hands on the rag hanging from my belt and stepped toward the open bay door. The California sun hit my eyes, but I could make out the shapes clearly enough. White Mercedes, fresh off some dealership lot, flanked by 2 pickup trucks with matching decals on the doors. Oak Ridge Commons HOA. The letters might as well have spelled trouble. The Mercedes door opened first. Out stepped a man I recognized from billboards along Route 9. Howard Fleming, owner of Fleming Motors, the biggest car dealership in the county. 50-something, silver hair combed like a politician, suit that cost more than most people's mortgage payments. Behind him came 2 younger guys in matching polo shirts and khaki pants, clipboards in hand, that particular look of bureaucratic self-importance plastered across their faces. Fleming stopped at my gate, looked at the motorcycles lined up in my yard, and wrinkled his nose like he'd stepped in something unpleasant. "Mr. Russo," he called out. Not a question. He knew exactly who I was. I'm Howard Fleming, president of the Oak Ridge Commons Homeowners Association. This structure has been flagged for immediate demolition. I didn't move from my spot. Just watched him, the way you watch a snake before deciding if it's venomous. Demolition, I repeated. This shop's been here since '94. His smile was all teeth, no warmth. The smile of a man who sells cars for a living and thinks that makes him a people person. And it's been an eyesore ever since. We've received numerous complaints. Noise violations, environmental hazards, zoning irregularities. The board voted unanimously last week. You have 30 days to vacate the premises and remove all equipment. After that, we proceed with authorized demolition. I stood up slowly. I'm not a small man. 6'2", 220 pounds. Most of it earned hauling engine blocks and wrestling with stubborn transmissions. The tattoo on my neck caught the light. A cross with my father's name beneath it. Sal Russo, 1948 to 2019. Your HOA was founded in 2006, I said, keeping my voice even. My father built this shop 12 years before that. You don't have jurisdiction over a damn thing here. Fleming reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. He held it up like a trophy. Actually, we do. New county ordinance passed last year. Annexed properties within a quarter-mile of established HOA boundaries now fall under community architectural standards. Your little garage fails every single one. He said the word garage, the way someone might say cockroach. I looked at the folder, then back at him. Studied his face, the practiced confidence, the expensive watch, the manicured hands that had never held a wrench in their lives. You're Fleming Motors, I said. The dealership on Route 9, the one with the big American flag out front. Something flickered across his face. Brief, controlled, but there. I don't see how my business interests are relevant to this conversation. I do. I took a step closer, not threatening, just closing distance. 3 of your former customers came to me last month. The Collins family, the Petersons, that attorney from Boston, what's his name? Richardson. They bought custom bikes from me instead of overpriced sedans from you. Collins told me your prices were highway robbery. The silence stretched between us like a taut chain. They said your finance department tried to roll their negative equity into a new loan, tried to bury them in debt for a car they didn't even want that much. I tilted my head. How's business these days, Howard? Lot of folks switching from 4 wheels to 2, I've noticed. His jaw tightened. The smile disappeared. 30 days, Mr. Russo. After that, we bring the bulldozers. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. And trust me, no one's going to stop them for some biker with a wrench. He got in his Mercedes and drove off. The 2 polo shirt boys scrambled to follow in the pickups. Dust settled behind them like a curtain closing on the first act. I stood there for a long time after they left, looking at my shop, the corrugated metal walls, the hand-painted sign above the door that my father made himself. Russo Ironworks. The letters were fading now, 20-odd years of California sun bleaching them pale, but they were still readable. Still there. I walked inside and looked at the wall where my father had hung photographs of every motorcycle we ever built together. 847 machines over 30 years. Each one a story. Each one somebody's dream made real. In the corner sat his workbench, the same one he'd built in 1994, the year he bought this land. I never moved it after he died. Never touched his tools, still laid out the way he left them. There was dust on them now, a thin film of time and absence, but I couldn't bring myself to wipe it away. Above the bench hung a wooden plaque, the letters burned in with a soldering iron. Russo & Son, built to last. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Yeah, it's Vinny," I said when the line connected. "Remember that favor you owed me? Time to collect and bring the club." My father was born in Naples in 1948, came to America in 1970 with $200 in his pocket and a head full of dreams about what this country could be for a man willing to work. He got a job at the Harrelson manufacturing plant up in Riverside. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, breathing in asbestos fibers that would spend the next 4 decades slowly killing him. But he saved. Every spare dollar went into a coffee can he kept under the floorboards of his apartment. By 1985, he had enough to buy a small garage on the east side of town and start taking repair jobs on the side. By 1990, he was working on motorcycles full-time. By 1994, he had enough to buy this plot of land. 2 acres of California scrubland that nobody else wanted. I remember the day we drove out here to look at it. I was 14 years old, all awkward limbs and teenage attitude, and I couldn't understand why my father was so excited about a patch of dirt with nothing on it but weeds and a half-collapsed fence. "Vincenzo," he said, using my full name the way he always did when he wanted me to pay attention. "You see this land?" "I see dirt, Pop." He laughed, that big booming laugh that came from somewhere deep in his chest. "You see dirt because you look with your eyes. Look with your heart. This land, this is freedom. Nobody can tell us what to build here. Nobody can tell us to leave. This is ours." He built the shop himself. Every weekend for 8 months, I'd come out here with him and hand him tools while he laid the foundation, raised the walls, installed the electrical. My mother would bring us lunch in a cooler and watch us work, shaking her head at the sawdust in our hair. The day we finished, my father stood in the middle of the empty building and spread his arms wide. "Now," he said, "now we build motorcycles." And we did. For 25 years, we built motorcycles. Customs, restorations, choppers, bobbers, cafe racers. Whatever somebody dreamed, we made real. My father taught me everything: how to read an engine by its sound, how to feel for flaws in metal with my fingertips, how to talk to customers so they trusted you with their machines and their money. "We don't just build motorcycles, Vinny," he told me once, when I was 19 and impatient, wanting to rush through a job. "We build trust. Every bolt you tighten, that's your word. Every weld you lay, that's your reputation. A man is only as good as the work he leaves behind." In 2015, my father started coughing. At first, we thought it was just a cold, maybe allergies. But the cough got worse. Then came the shortness of breath. Then the diagnosis that hit us like a freight train, mesothelioma. The asbestos from that factory job in the 70s, the one that gave him his start in America, had finally come to collect. He fought for 4 years. Chemo, radiation, experimental treatments. My mother died in 2017, heart attack, and I think that took more out of him than the cancer ever did. But he kept coming to the shop every day he could manage. Even when he couldn't work, he'd sit in his chair by the bench and watch me, offering advice, critiquing my technique, telling stories about the old days. The last words he ever said to me were, "In this shop." March 14th, 2019. He was sitting in that chair, oxygen tank beside him, watching me finish a restoration on a 1968 Electra Glide. "Keep the shop, Vinny," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not just metal and wood. It's everything I ever was. Everything we built together. Promise me." "I promise, Pop." He died that night, 61 years old, half a lifetime stolen by corporate negligence and asbestos dust. I buried him next to my mother in the Italian cemetery on the hill overlooking the valley. Then I came back to the shop and sat in his chair until the sun came up. Now Howard Fleming wanted to bulldoze everything my father spent his life building. Over my dead body. The 5th day after Fleming's visit, I came to the shop at 6 a.m. like always. But something was wrong before I even reached the gate. The lock was cut, heavy-duty padlock, hardened steel, sliced clean through with bolt cutters. The chain lay coiled on the ground like a dead snake. I pushed the gate open and walked toward the shop. The bay door was ajar. I could see movement inside, shadows passing across the windows. I didn't run, didn't shout. I just walked, reaching into my pocket for my phone and hitting record on the camera. Inside, 2 men in black polo shirts were going through my tool cabinets. One was photographing everything with a digital camera. The other was loading items into a plastic bin. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" They spun around. One of them, young guy with a patchy beard, nearly dropped the socket wrench set he was holding. My father's socket wrench set. "Sir, this structure is condemned," the other one said, trying to sound official. He was older, heavy-set, moved like a former bouncer. "We're documenting hazardous materials for the demolition survey. Those are woodworking tools in your hand, and those are my property." I stepped closer, making sure my phone captured their faces. "You're trespassing." The heavy one laughed. "HOA has full authority. Read your covenant, pal." "I'm not your pal. And I don't have a covenant, because this shop predates your HOA by 12 years. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Page 47, Section 12 of the Oak Ridge Commons Charter. Structures predating association formation are exempt from architectural review. I did my homework. They exchanged glances. The younger one reached for his radio. "You can call whoever you want," I said. "But if you're not off my property in 60 seconds, the next call is going to be from the sheriff's office." They left, but not before the heavy one. Murphy, his name tag read, grabbed a toolbox from my father's workbench. Not a regular toolbox. My mother's toolbox. The one she used when she helped my father with upholstery work. The one that still had her initials painted on the side. M.R. Maria Russo. "This is going in the hazmat inventory," Murphy said, tucking it under his arm. "Put that back." He grinned. Yellow teeth, bad breath, the smile of a man who enjoyed having power over other people. "Come and take it, biker boy." I took a step forward. He flinched, but he didn't put the toolbox back. He just walked out, faster than he'd come in, and climbed into a white SUV with the Oak Ridge Commons logo on the door. After they were gone, I walked through my shop, documenting the damage. Drawers pulled open, cabinets rifled through, parts scattered across my workbench. And in the corner, my father's chair, the one he sat in every day for 25 years, had been knocked over. Someone had stepped on it. There was a boot print on the seat cushion, a big boot, Murphy's size. But the worst part was the wall. The photograph wall. 847 pictures, one for every motorcycle we'd built together. Someone had torn one down, left a clean rectangle of unfaded paint where it used to hang. I knew which picture it was without even looking. The very first one. 1989. Me and my father standing beside a Harley Electra Glide we'd restored together. My first real project. I was 16 years old, grinning like an idiot, my father's arm around my shoulders. They took it, they came into my shop, my father's shop, and they stole the first photograph of us together. I walked to the wall and touched the empty space. The paint felt cold under my fingertips. Then I reached for my phone and called Deputy Martinez. He'd been coming to me for motorcycle work for 15 years. His Sportster ran like a dream thanks to the custom cam I'd installed last summer. "Vinny," he said when he picked up. "Everything okay?" "No," I said. "It's not. I need you to come to the shop and bring your evidence kit." The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in bureaucratic warfare. Fleming wasn't just trying to demolish my shop. He was trying to bury me in paper. Week 1 brought the inspectors. Fire marshal showed up on Monday, found 14 violations I'd never heard of before. Electrical inspector on Wednesday said my wiring didn't meet current code, never mind that it met the code from 1994, when the shop was built and had passed every inspection since. Environmental protection on Friday, responding to an anonymous complaint about hazardous waste storage. I kept copies of everything. Every citation, every notice, every form they made me sign, stacked them in a folder on my desk, watching it grow thicker by the day. Week 2 hit me in the wallet. My bank called to inform me that my business line of credit was being reviewed due to risk reassessment. Translation: someone had whispered in their ear that I was a bad bet. My insurance company canceled my policy, effective immediately, citing elevated liability concerns. And when I called my parts supplier to order components for a customer build, they told me their inventory was sold out. Someone bought our entire stock of Harley parts, the manager said, sounding embarrassed. Paid cash, wouldn't say who. I did the math. Someone had just spent north of $50,000 to make sure I couldn't finish my current projects. That's not a dispute. That's economic warfare. Week 3 went for my reputation. Flyers appeared in mailboxes throughout the neighborhood. Glossy paper, professional printing. Russo Ironworks, noise pollution, toxic fumes, criminal activity. The question mark was a nice legal touch. Couldn't sue for defamation if you were just asking questions. My neighbor of 15 years, Tom Hendricks, crossed the street to avoid me at the grocery store. The owner of the coffee shop where I'd eaten breakfast every morning for a decade told me it might be better if I stopped coming around for a while, just until things settled down. But it was the lien that really twisted the knife. I got the notice on a Tuesday afternoon. The Oak Ridge Commons HOA had filed a lien against my property for $47,000 in unpaid assessments and penalties. $47,000 I'd never owed because I'd never been part of their HOA. I drove to the county recorder's office that afternoon. Needed to see the paper trail, understand exactly what they thought they had on me. The clerk was a woman named Doris, who'd been working there since the Reagan administration. She knew my father. Used to bring her Honda to him for service back in the day. "Vinny Russo," she said when I walked up to the counter. "Haven't seen you in years. How's your dad doing?" I just looked at her. "Oh," she said quietly. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." 5 years now," I said. "Listen, Doris, I need to see the records for my property. Everything you've got. deeds, liens, any documents filed in the last 10 years. She pulled them up. Most of it was familiar. The original deed from 1994, my father's name in the owner line. The title transfer after he died, putting it in my name. Business licenses, inspection records, nothing out of the ordinary. And then I saw it, a document I'd never seen before. Voluntary annexation agreement, it said at the top. Dated June 15th, 2019. A signature at the bottom in blue ink. Salvatore Russo, my father's name, on a document dated 3 months after his death. I stared at it for a long time. The letters blurred and reformed. My hands were shaking. "Doris," I said, keeping my voice steady. "When was this document filed?" She checked the timestamp. July 2nd, 2019. And it's dated June 15th. That's what it says. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a card, a copy of my father's death certificate, the one I'd been carrying since I buried him. "My father died on March 14th, 2019, I said. "He couldn't have signed anything in June. He was already in the ground." Doris went pale. She looked at the document, then at the death certificate, then back at the document. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "Oh my God is right." I knew my father's signature better than I knew my own. Watched him sign thousands of documents over the years. Work orders, invoices, birthday cards, the title to my first motorcycle. His handwriting was distinctive. Bold, slanted slightly to the right, with a flourish on the capital S that looked almost like a treble clef. The signature on the annexation agreement was close. Very close. Someone had done their homework, probably copied it from an old document, but they'd made one mistake. In 2003, my father broke his right hand in a shop accident, crushed it between a dropped engine block and the concrete floor. After it healed, his signature changed. The flourish on the S became smaller, tighter, less confident. The forgery on this document had the old flourish, the pre-2003 flourish. Whoever faked it had copied a signature from before the accident. I took pictures of everything, the document, the timestamp, the signature. Then I thanked Doris and walked out into the afternoon sun. For a moment, I just stood there on the steps of the county building, feeling the weight of what I'd discovered pressing down on my chest. They hadn't just tried to steal my father's land. They'd forged a dead man's signature to do it. They'd used his name, his identity, his legacy to take everything he'd built. I got in my truck and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. Just sat there, staring at nothing, feeling something cold and heavy settling in my gut. Not anger. Anger is hot. This was colder than that. This was the feeling you get when you realize that someone has crossed a line so far beyond the pale that there's no going back. No negotiation, no compromise. This was war. I started with what I knew. Howard Fleming wanted my shop gone. He'd sent goons to intimidate me, bureaucrats to harass me, and forgers to steal my property. The question was why? What could possibly be worth this level of effort? I'm not a detective. I'm a mechanic. But I've been in business for 20 years, and that teaches you a thing or two about how people operate. Follow the money, my father used to say. Everything else is just noise. So I started following. First stop was Fleming Motors, not to confront anyone, just to observe. I parked across the street and watched for a couple of hours. The lot was full of inventory, rows and rows of shiny new cars with window stickers advertising prices that made my head spin. But the showroom was quiet. Hardly any customers walking through. The salesmen stood in clusters by the coffee machine looking bored. I did some research that night. Pulled up everything I could find on Fleming Motors, news articles, financial filings, court records. What I found painted an interesting picture. Sales at Fleming Motors had dropped 34% over the past 3 years. The dealership had taken out 2 major loans in the past 18 months to cover operating costs. Howard Fleming himself had refinanced his personal residence twice. The man was drowning. His business was failing, and he was throwing money at the problem, hoping it would go away. But why? I dug deeper, looked at broader industry trends, and there it was, plain as day. New car sales were down across the board, but you know what was up? Motorcycle sales. Custom bike shops were booming. Enthusiast culture was growing. People wanted something unique, something personal, something that wasn't just another sedan in a sea of identical sedans. People like the Collins family, the Petersons, that lawyer Richardson from Boston. All of them had been ready to drop serious money at Fleming Motors before they discovered Russo Ironworks. Collins had told me the story when he came in for his custom Softdale. He'd been at Fleming's dealership, about to sign papers on his $60,000 Mercedes, when the finance manager tried to roll his existing car loan into the new deal. Would have put him underwater by $15,000. He walked out and came to me instead. Bought a bike for half the price and had money left over for a vacation with his wife. I was stealing Howard Fleming's customers, not on purpose, just by being better at what I did. And now he was trying to eliminate the competition. But there was more. There had to be. No businessman launches this kind of assault just over lost sales. I kept digging. That's when I found the county planning document, a proposal from 3 years ago to rezone the area around my shop from light industrial to commercial. The proposal had been submitted by a development company called Oak Ridge Partners, LLC. I looked up the ownership of Oak Ridge Partners. 3 names on the filing. 2 I didn't recognize. The third was Howard Fleming. The picture was getting clearer. Fleming didn't just want me gone because of competition. He wanted my land. 2 acres of prime real estate, right on the main road, perfect for expanding his dealership. He'd probably been planning this for years, slowly buying up adjacent properties, waiting for the right moment. My father's death must have seemed like a gift. An old man gone, leaving behind a son who might not want to keep the family business. Easy pickings. Except I wasn't easy, and I wasn't leaving. I needed more information. Specifically, I needed someone on the inside. Someone who knew how Fleming operated, what his pressure points were, where the bodies were buried. The call came 3 days later. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Russo? A woman's voice. Older, tired, nervous. Who's asking? My name is Carla Dominguez. I used to work for Howard Fleming. I sat up straighter. Used to? He fired me. 6 months ago. I worked there for 8 years, and he fired me because I refused to... She trailed off. Refused to what, Carla? A long pause. Then, can we meet somewhere? I don't want to say too much on the phone. He has people everywhere. We met at a diner outside of town, far from prying eyes, far from Oak Ridge Commons, far from anywhere Fleming might have influence. Carla was in her 50s, Hispanic, gray streaking through dark hair, hands that trembled slightly when she lifted her coffee cup. She'd been Fleming's executive assistant for 8 years, knew everything about his business operations. He's a crook, she said bluntly, once we'd ordered and the waitress had walked away. I didn't want to believe it for a long time. Told myself he was just aggressive, just ambitious. But it's worse than that. She told me about the document alterations, odometer rollbacks on used cars, VIN numbers changed on salvage vehicles, financing paperwork modified after customers signed to hide unfavorable terms, warranty claims denied through falsified service records. When I wouldn't sign off on a particularly bad one, He fired me, she said. Threatened to blackball me in the industry. Told me if I ever talked, he'd make sure I never worked again. But you're talking to me. She looked me in the eye. I saw what he's doing to you on the news. That interview with the neighbors complaining about your shop. I know those neighbors, Mr. Russo. Howard paid them to say those things. Gave them gift cards and discounts on car service. How do you know all this? She reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. Set it on the table between us. 8 years of emails, contracts, modified documents, audio recordings of meetings where he discussed things he shouldn't have discussed. She pushed the drive toward me. I kept copies of everything. Insurance, I told myself, in case I ever needed leverage. I looked at the drive, then at her. Why give it to me? Because someone needs to stop him, and because your father once did me a kindness. She smiled sadly. 15 years ago, my car broke down on the highway, dead of winter, freezing cold, no money for a tow. A man pulled over and spent 2 hours in the snow fixing my engine. Wouldn't take a penny for it, just said, pass it on someday. That sounds like my father. Sal Russo, she said. I never forgot his name. When I saw what Howard was trying to do to his son, to your shop, I knew it was time to pass it on. I took the flash drive and put it in my pocket. Thank you, Carla. There's one more thing you should know, she said. The signature on your annexation agreement. I saw Howard showing it to one of his lawyers a few months ago. He was bragging about how easy it was to get, how they'd copied it from an old service record your father had signed at the dealership years ago. A service record. My father had taken his pickup truck to Fleming Motors once, back in 2001 for a warranty repair. Before the accident, before his signature changed, they'd used his own paperwork against him. The emails on Carla's drive were everything I'd hoped for, and worse. Howard Fleming wasn't just harassing me. He was running a criminal enterprise disguised as a car dealership. But the email that mattered most was dated 2 weeks before Fleming's first visit to my shop. From Howard Fleming to Kevin Murphy. Subject, Russo problem. Get that greasy biker out of my territory. I don't care how. The annexation papers are ready. Make sure he doesn't have time to fight back. By the time he figures out what's happening, his shop will be a parking lot for my new expansion. Greasy biker. That's what he thought of me, of my father's legacy, of 20 years of honest work. I forwarded the email to my lawyer and asked her to start preparing a case. Then I reached out to some old friends. The Iron Legion MC has been around since the Vietnam era. Started by veterans who came home to a country that didn't want them. Men who found brotherhood and purpose on 2 wheels when the straight world turned its back. My father used to work on their bikes back in the 70s before I was born. He never joined, never wore a patch, but he earned their respect through quality work and a closed mouth. When I was 22, fresh out of the army myself, I started doing maintenance for the club. They paid fair, never asked questions I didn't want to answer, and always stood by their word. In the biker world, that's worth more than money. I called Big Frank DeLuca first, 73 years old, retired attorney, hands like catcher's mitts and a mind sharp as a straight razor. He'd been riding with the Legion since 1969. These days, he mostly sat in the clubhouse playing cards and telling stories about the old days, but his law license was still active. Vinny Russo, he said when I reached him, haven't heard from you since that charity run last September. What's the trouble? I told him everything. The HOA, the forged documents, the harassment campaign, the stolen photograph. He listened without interrupting, asking occasional questions, making notes on what I could hear was a legal pad. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. They forged Sal's signature, he finally said. Your father's signature, after he was dead. That's right. And they're trying to bulldoze his shop. That's right. Another long silence. Then, I'll make some calls. This kind of thing. It gets the brothers worked up. Sal Russo helped a lot of people over the years. A lot of people who remember what that meant. I'm not asking for anything violent, Frank. I just need witnesses. Character references. People who can speak to what my father built and what it meant to this community. You'll have that and more, son. But first, you need to understand something. His voice hardened. These HOA people, these dealership crooks, they're used to pushing around civilians. Regular folks who get scared and back down. They've never dealt with our world. They don't understand what happens when you come after one of our own. What happens? We show up, he said simply. All of us. And we don't leave until the job is done. While Frank rallied the troops, I did some investigating of my own. Specifically, I wanted to know exactly what kind of shape Fleming Motors was in. Not just financially, but structurally. I hired a private inspector. Ex-building department, retired 2 years ago, had a reputation for being thorough and impossible to bribe. Cost me $3,000 for a full survey, but it was money well spent. The report came back 4 days later. I read it in my shop, sitting in my father's chair, and by the time I finished, I was laughing. Fleming Motors had 23 building code violations. 23. The Service Bay addition they'd built in 2019, no permit. The electrical upgrade they'd done for the new digital displays, not to code, potential fire hazard. The underground fuel storage tanks. Leaking, contaminating the groundwater in violation of EPA regulations. The man who'd accused me of being an environmental hazard was literally poisoning the water table. But it got better. The drainage system from his lot was directing runoff onto neighboring properties. The emergency exits in his showroom didn't meet fire safety standards. The paint booth in his body shop had ventilation issues that would make OSHA inspectors weep with joy. Howard Fleming had spent so much time and money trying to destroy my shop that he'd neglected his own. The house of cards was ready to fall. It just needed someone to blow on it. I sent copies of the inspector's report to every relevant agency. Building Department, Fire Marshal, EPA, OSHA, County Planning Office. All anonymous, all from a library computer 3 towns over, all carefully documented. Then I sat back and waited for the demolition hearing. They came for the shop 2 nights before the hearing, 3 in the morning. I was sleeping in the back room, a habit I'd picked up since the break-in. Didn't trust security systems alone anymore. Didn't trust anything I couldn't see with my own eyes. The sound of breaking glass woke me. Not the door, the side window, the one next to the paint storage. I rolled off the cot, grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed, and moved through the darkness toward the sound. I could smell it before I saw it. Gasoline. Sharp, acrid, unmistakable. Someone was pouring gasoline on my building. I hit the lights. The sudden glare caught him mid-pour, jerry can in hand, face covered with a bandana. But I knew that body shape, that shuffling gait. Murphy, the same bastard who'd stolen my mother's toolbox. He dropped the can and ran. I didn't chase him, just stood there, looking at the puddle of gasoline spreading across my floor, inches from the wall where my father's photographs hung. But the fire didn't start. He'd poured the gas, but he hadn't lit it. Why? I looked closer at the wall and understood. The wood was wet, not from gasoline, from something else. Something that had been applied recently, professionally, fire retardant. I walked outside, shining my flashlight along the base of the building. The entire exterior had been treated. Recently. The wood was dark with it, still slightly tacky to the touch. Under a rock by the back door, I found a note written on a scrap of paper. Your old man asked me to fireproof this place back in 2018. Said someday someone would try to burn it down. Guess he was right. Eddie C. Eddie Cortez. retired firefighter. Lost his son in Iraq back in 2007. My father had rebuilt his Indian Scout after the funeral. Refused to take a dime for it. Said no man should lose his boy and his bike in the same year. I stood there in the dark, holding that note, and felt my father's presence all around me. He'd known. Somehow he'd known this day would come. And he'd spent his last years preparing for it, calling in favors, building a wall of protection around everything he'd built. Even from the grave, Sal Russo was taking care of his son. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before dawn and rode my father's bike to the shop. His 1972 shovel head, the one he'd rebuilt himself, the one he taught me to ride on. Hadn't taken it out in months, but today felt right. The sun was just coming up when I pulled into the lot. Golden light spilling across the mountains, catching the dew on the grass, making everything look fresh and clean and new. I sat on the bike for a long time just looking at the shop, at the faded sign, at the walls my father built with his own hands. Whatever happened today, I wanted to remember this moment, this feeling, the last time things would be the way they'd always been. By 9 o'clock, I was at the county administrative building, dressed in clean jeans and my father's old leather jacket, the one he wore every day in the shop for 30 years, the one that still smelled like motor oil and cigarettes and him. The hearing room was on the second floor. Big space, wood paneling, flags in the corner, the kind of room where bureaucratic decisions get made while regular people's lives hang in the balance. Fleming was already there, front row, surrounded by lawyers, HOA board members, a group of neighbors I recognized from the flyers, the concerned citizens who'd been paid to complain about my shop. He looked confident, smug even, like a man who'd already won and was just here to collect his trophy. His lawyers had files stacked on the table, documents, photographs, expert testimony, a whole arsenal of paper designed to bury me. I sat down at my own table. Just me and Maria Santos, the property lawyer I'd hired after finding the forged signature. Maria was small, fierce, the daughter of Mexican immigrants who'd worked their way up from nothing. She understood what it meant to fight for what your family built. "You ready?" she asked. "Almost," I said. "We're waiting for some friends." Fleming noticed me and smiled. That same teeth-without-warmth smile from the day he'd come to my shop. "Mr. Russo," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "I'm glad you could make it. I hope you've had time to pack." I didn't respond. Just checked my watch. The judge entered. A heavy man with tired eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, the kind of civil servant who'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Case 2024-1847, he announced. Oak Ridge Commons Homeowners Association versus Russo Ironworks. This is a hearing to determine the status of the demolition order issued against the property located at... That's when we all heard it. A low rumble, like thunder, but steadier, growing louder. The windows began to vibrate. Fleming frowned and turned toward the window. The judge paused mid-sentence. The whole room went quiet. The rumble became a roar, the unmistakable sound of motorcycle engines, not one or two, dozens. Through the window, I could see them coming, a river of chrome and leather flowing into the parking lot. Harley-Davidsons, Indians, custom builds, choppers, black jackets, gray beards, American flags, the Iron Legion MC, followed by the Road Saints, followed by independents from all over the state. 53 motorcycles in all. I counted them later. They parked in perfect rows, engines falling silent one by one, and then they dismounted. Old men and young men, mechanics and lawyers and veterans and teachers. Some of them I knew, some I'd never seen before, but they all wore the same expression. Calm, patient, determined. They walked toward the building in a loose formation, nobody rushing, nobody shouting. Just a quiet parade of solidarity. The hearing room door opened. Frank DeLuca entered first, his white beard immaculate, his leather vest bearing decades of patches and pins. Behind him came the others, filling the gallery seats, lining the walls, standing in the back when the seats ran out. The judge's eyebrows had climbed nearly to his hairline. "What is this?" Fleming demanded. "You can't just— these people have no standing in this case." "Actually," Maria said, standing smoothly, "they do." California Civil Code. Section 1354 allows any interested party to attend public hearings regarding land use disputes. These gentlemen and ladies are concerned community members with personal knowledge of the property in question and its owner. Fleming's lawyers huddled together, whispering frantically. The judge rapped his gavel twice. "Order. Let's have order." He looked at the assembled bikers with a mixture of confusion and respect. "I'll allow the audience to remain as long as there are no disruptions. Now, can we proceed?" Maria nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Before the HOA presents its case, the defense would like to challenge the court's jurisdiction over this property." Fleming's lead attorney, a sleek man named Harrison, stood up. "Your Honor, the jurisdiction is clear. The property was voluntarily annexed into the Oak Ridge Commons HOA in June of 2019. We have the signed documentation, and we contend that documentation is fraudulent," Maria replied. She walked to the overhead projector and placed 3 documents on the screen. Exhibit A, the original deed to the Russo property, dated 1994. The shop was built 12 years before the Oak Ridge Commons HOA was even formed. She changed slides. Exhibit B, the so-called Voluntary Annexation Agreement, dated June 15th, 2019, bearing the signature of Salvatore Russo. Another slide. Exhibit C, the death certificate of Salvatore Russo. Date of death, March 14th, 2019, 3 months before the annexation agreement was allegedly signed. A murmur rippled through the room. Even the judge leaned forward. "Someone forged a dead man's signature," Maria continued. "Someone used the name of a man who was already in his grave to steal property from his son." Harrison stood up, face red. "This is outrageous. That signature was verified by—" "By whom?" Maria cut in. "Your client's own notary. A document examiner hired by the HOA. We have independent forensic analysis." She pulled out another folder. The signature on the annexation agreement was copied from a service record dated 2001. We know this because Salvatore Russo broke his right hand in 2003. His signature changed after that. The forgery shows the pre-2003 signature pattern. She placed 2 signature samples on the screen. Even to an untrained eye, the differences were obvious. The judge studied the evidence for a long moment. Then he turned to Fleming. "Mr. Fleming, would you like to respond to these allegations?" Fleming's face had gone pale. His lawyers were whispering urgently, but he pushed them aside and stood up. "Your Honor, this is all circumstantial. The defense is trying to confuse the issue with technicalities. The fact remains that the Russo property is a blight on our community. Noise complaints, environmental violations—" "Speaking of environmental violations," Maria interrupted, "the defense would like to submit additional evidence." She pulled out another stack of papers. "This is a building inspection report for Fleming Motors, located on Route 9. 23 code violations, including an illegal addition built without permits, electrical hazards, and underground fuel tanks that are contaminating the groundwater." She let that sink in. "Mr. Fleming has accused my client of being an environmental hazard, but his own business is literally poisoning the water supply." Fleming shot to his feet. "That report is a fabrication. You have no right—" "The report was conducted by a licensed inspector," Maria said calmly. "All findings have been submitted to the relevant regulatory agencies, but we're not here to discuss Mr. Fleming's business practices." She paused. We're here to discuss his personal vendetta against my client. She clicked to a new slide. An email appeared on the screen. From Howard Fleming to Kevin Murphy, dated 2 weeks before Mr. Fleming first visited the Russo property. Quote, "Get that greasy biker out of my territory. I don't care how. The annexation papers are ready. By the time he figures out what's happening, his shop will be a parking lot for my new expansion." The room went silent. We also have evidence of attempted arson. Video footage appeared on screen. A figure pouring gasoline on the side of a building. This was taken 2 nights ago at the Russo property. The individual in the video has been identified as Kevin Murphy, an employee of Oak Ridge Commons HOA security. He was arrested this morning and is currently cooperating with police. Fleming's face had gone from pale to gray. His lawyers looked like men watching a ship sink. "Your Honor," Maria said, "this was never about code violations or community standards. This was about a wealthy businessman trying to destroy a competitor and steal his land." Howard Fleming forged documents, harassed my client, and ultimately attempted to burn down his property. We move to dismiss all charges against Russo Ironworks and request that this matter be referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation. The judge sat back in his chair. He looked at Fleming, at the pile of evidence, at the 53 bikers sitting in respectful silence. "Mr. Fleming," he said slowly, "do you have anything to say?" Fleming stood. His hands were shaking. "You don't understand. That shop, his business, he's been stealing my customers for years. Do you know how much money I've lost? Do you know what it's like to watch everything you've built?" "Your Honor," his lawyer tried to interrupt. But Fleming wasn't listening anymore. The facade had cracked. The anger, the desperation, the sense of entitlement, it was all pouring out now, unchecked. "I built Fleming Motors from nothing. I made this community, and now some greasy biker with a wrench thinks he can just take it all away. Those were my customers. That should be my land." Frank DeLuca stood up slowly in the gallery. At 73, he moved with the careful deliberation of a man who knew every step counted. "Your Honor," he said, his voice carrying easily through the silent room. "My name is Frank DeLuca. I'm a retired attorney, 40 years in practice. I've known Vinnie Russo since he was a boy fixing motorcycles in his daddy's shop." He looked at Fleming with something like pity. "Sal Russo was the most honest man I ever met. He built that shop with his own hands. He served this community for 3 decades, and when he died, he left behind a legacy of integrity and craftsmanship that men like Mr. Fleming will never understand." Frank turned to face the gallery, the rows of leather-clad men and women who'd come from all over the state. Every person in this room has a story about Sal Russo, the time he fixed their bike for free because they couldn't afford it, the time he gave them work when nobody else would, the time he just listened when they needed someone to talk to. He turned back to the judge. "You don't demolish a man's legacy because his competitor is jealous. You don't forge a dead man's signature to steal from his son. That's not how things work in our world. And I suspect it's not how things work in yours either." The judge nodded slowly. He shuffled through the papers on his desk, taking his time, letting the silence stretch. Finally, he spoke. "The demolition order is vacated. The annexation agreement is void due to clear evidence of fraud. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of forgery, fraud, attempted arson, and conspiracy to defraud homeowners." He looked at Fleming, who had collapsed back into his chair. "Mr. Fleming, I suggest you retain good counsel. You're going to need it." The bailiff moved toward Fleming. So did 2 police officers who had slipped into the room during Frank's speech. Handcuffs clicked shut around Fleming's wrists. "This isn't over," he screamed as they led him away. "Do you know who I am? I'll destroy all of you. The door closed behind him, cutting off his threats. I sat there for a long moment, not quite believing it was real. Maria put her hand on my shoulder. "We did it," she said softly. I looked at the gallery, at Frank DeLuca wiping his eyes with a handkerchief, at the rows of bikers, some of them openly crying, all of them nodding at me with respect. Then I looked at the empty space where Fleming had been sitting, the scattered papers, the abandoned briefcases, the lawyers gathering their things and avoiding eye contact. My father's voice echoed in my memory. A man is only as good as the work he leaves behind. Howard Fleming had built a business on lies and fraud, and now that work was coming down around his ears. I stood up and walked to the back of the room where the bikers were filing out. Frank met me at the door. "Your father would be proud," he said. "He prepared me for this," I replied. "Even from the grave, he was protecting the shop." Frank nodded. "Sal always said, 'Prepare for war, hope for peace.' Looks like he prepared pretty well." We walked out into the California sunshine together. 53 motorcycles gleaming in the parking lot, waiting to take their riders home. The trial came 4 months later. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Maria and a rotating crew of bikers who refused to let me face it alone. The prosecution laid out the case methodically. The forged annexation agreement, the harassment campaign, the building inspection fraud, the attempted arson, a paper trail of corruption that went back years. Murphy flipped almost immediately, testifying against Fleming in exchange for a reduced sentence. He admitted to the break-ins, the intimidation, the gasoline attack. Said he was just following orders, didn't know it was illegal, all the usual excuses. But it was Carla's testimony that sealed Fleming's fate. She took the stand with a stack of documents 3 inches thick and walked the jury through 8 years of fraud. The odometer rollbacks, the title washing, the customer scams, the bribery of local officials. By the time she was done, Fleming's defense attorney had given up trying to cross-examine. There was nothing left to salvage. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. Guilty on all counts. Forgery, fraud, conspiracy, attempted arson. Sentencing was 2 weeks later. Howard Fleming got 6 years in federal prison. His dealership license was revoked permanently. He was ordered to pay $420,000 in damages to me and restitution to his defrauded customers. But the real justice came when the county building inspector finally got around to that report on Fleming Motors. 23 code violations, just like my investigator had found. The illegal addition had to come down. The fuel tanks had to be remediated. The electrical system had to be completely replaced. Estimated cost, $1.2 million. Fleming couldn't pay it. Not from prison, not with his assets frozen, not with his business in ruins. The bank foreclosed. The property went to auction. And 6 months after Howard Fleming tried to bulldoze my father's shop, a county demolition crew tore down his dealership. I didn't go to watch. Didn't need to. Some victories are best enjoyed quietly. The shop is still standing. Same walls my father built, same sign above the door, same photographs on the wall. I had them reframed after the trial, all 847 of them. I added a few new ones too. The hearing, with 53 motorcycles in the parking lot. Frank DeLuca shaking my hand outside the courthouse. The Iron Legion MC presenting me with an honorary patch at their annual picnic. And one more. A photograph of my father's workbench, exactly the way he left it. His tools laid out in their proper places. His chair sitting empty beside it. The wooden plaque overhead. Letters burned in by his own hand. Russo and Son, built to last. 3 months after the trial ended, I was in the shop working on a custom build when I heard the familiar crunch of gravel outside. But this time it wasn't threatening. Just a steady stream of motorcycles pulling into the lot. The Iron Legion had come for the grand reopening. Not that I'd really closed, but they insisted on making it official. A celebration, they said. A testament to what we'd accomplished together. Frank DeLuca showed up with a banner he'd had made. Russo Ironworks, Est 1994, still standing. They hung it across the front of the shop while someone fired up a grill and someone else rolled out a keg. By noon, there must have been 100 people in my lot. Bikers, neighbors, customers old and new. Even some of the folks who'd avoided me during the harassment campaign showed up with apologies and casseroles. I accepted both. Tom Hendricks, the neighbor who'd crossed the street to avoid me, came up with his hat in his hands. "Vinny, I'm sorry," he said. "I should have known better, should have stood by you." "You're standing now," I told him. That's what matters. The local news showed up around 2 o'clock. Did a piece on the shop, on the trial, on the community that had rallied to save a small business from corporate greed. The reporter asked me what it felt like to win. This wasn't about winning, I told her. It was about keeping a promise. My father built this place with his own hands. He asked me to protect it. That's all I did. She asked about Fleming, about the years in prison, the demolished dealership, the ruined reputation. I thought about it for a moment. I don't have any anger toward him, I finally said. He made his choices, built his business on lies and fraud. Sooner or later, that always falls apart. I just made sure it was sooner. The party went late into the evening. Someone brought out a guitar. Someone else started telling stories about my father, about the old days, about bikes and brotherhood and what it meant to be part of something larger than yourself. I slipped away around sunset, walked into the shop while the noise of the party faded behind me. Stood in front of my father's workbench, looking at his tools, his chair, the worn groove in the concrete floor where he'd stood for 30 years. "We did it, Pop," I said quietly. "They came for your shop and we stopped them, every last one of them." I picked up his hammer, the same one Murphy had knocked to the floor during the break-in. I'd fixed the handle myself, wrapped it in new leather, but kept the original head. The steel still bore the marks of 1,000 jobs, 1,000 repairs, 1,000 small acts of creation. I hung it back in its place on the pegboard, right where it belonged. Outside, I could hear Frank DeLuca's voice rising above the crowd, telling some story about my father that I'd heard 100 times but never got tired of hearing. I walked back out to join them, to raise a glass, to thank them for coming, to celebrate what we'd built and what we'd saved. But I paused at the door and looked back one more time. At the bench, the tools, the photographs. At everything my father had left behind, built to last, I said softly. "You always said that, and you were right, Pop. You were right about everything." Then I walked out into the California evening where my family was waiting, and let myself enjoy the victory we'd earned together. They thought I was just some biker with a wrench. They thought my father's shop was just metal and wood, easy to tear down, easy to replace. They didn't understand. They never understood. We don't just build motorcycles. We build trust. Every bolt we tighten is our word. Every weld we lay is our reputation. And some things, no matter how hard people try to destroy them, are simply built to last. Not because they're indestructible, but because the people who built them refuse to let them fall. That's my father's legacy. That's my promise. And as long as I'm breathing, as long as there's a Russo left to turn a wrench and true a wheel, that shop will stand. Fleming found that out the hard way. The next person who tries will find out too. Because we don't run, we don't fold, we don't surrender what's ours just because someone with money and lawyers thinks they can take it. We're Russos. We build things, and what we build, we keep. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a motorcycle to finish. Customers coming to pick it up tomorrow. Man from Nevada drove 600 miles because someone told him that if you want the job done right, you go to Russo Ironworks. That's the reputation my father built. That's the legacy I intend to keep. And that, my friend, is how a bunch of bikers brought down a crooked businessman and saved my father's shop from the wrecking ball. Not with violence, not with threats, just with truth and patience and 53 Harley-Davidsons showing up when it mattered most. My father would have loved that last part. He always said there was nothing quite like the sound of a Harley engine to get people's attention. He was right about that, too. He usually was. 6 months after the trial, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, postmarked from a federal correctional facility in Arizona. I knew who it was from before I even opened it. Howard Fleming. Writing from his cell. The letter was 3 pages long, front and back, written in cramped handwriting that got smaller and more erratic as it went. It started with accusations. I'd destroyed his life. I'd turned everyone against him. I'd stolen everything he'd built. Then it shifted to justifications. He was just trying to protect his business. He was just trying to compete. Anyone would have done the same in his position. And finally, on the last page, something I didn't expect. An apology. Not a real one. Not the kind that means anything, but the shadow of one. The acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, he'd gone too far. I read that letter 3 times. Then I folded it up and put it in a drawer with the rest of the trial documents. Evidence of what had happened. A reminder of what I'd survived. A week later, I wrote back. 1 page. Simple words. Mr. Fleming, I received your letter. I want you to know something. My father spent 40 years breathing asbestos dust in a factory so he could save enough money to build his own business. He spent another 30 years building motorcycles, raising a family, contributing to his community. When he died, he left behind a legacy of integrity that no amount of money could ever buy. You had every advantage in life: money, connections, education. You could have built something real. Instead, you chose to lie, cheat, and steal. You chose to forge a dead man's signature. You chose to try to burn down what he built. You're in prison now because of those choices. Not because of me. Not because of the bikers who showed up at that hearing. Because you built your life on a foundation of fraud, and eventually all frauds collapse. I don't hate you. I don't even think about you much anymore. I'm too busy doing what my father taught me to do. Building things, fixing things, keeping my word. That's the difference between us, Mr. Fleming. That was always the difference. I hope the next 6 years give you time to think about what you could have been, what you could have built if you'd chosen a different path. As for me, I'll be in my shop, doing honest work, honoring my father's memory. That's enough for me. It always was. Vincent Russo had the Iron Works established, 1994. I never heard back from him, didn't expect to. Some conversations don't need a response. The shop expanded last year. Added another bay, hired 2 young mechanics fresh out of trade school. Taught them the way my father taught me. Hands-on, patient, demanding. The way you pass knowledge from one generation to the next. One of them, a kid named Marcus, asked me once about the photographs on the wall. 847 frames, plus the new ones from the last few years. He wanted to know why I kept them all. Because every one of those pictures is a promise, I told him. A promise we made to a customer. A promise we kept. When someone trusts you with their machine, with their dream, you don't take that lightly. You give them everything you've got. He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. Maybe he was just being polite. Either way, he's turning into a damn fine mechanic. The Iron Legion still comes around every few months. They hold their summer picnic in my lot now, a tradition that started after the trial and shows no signs of stopping. Frank DeLuca passed away last winter, peacefully in his sleep at 75. We held the memorial service at the shop. Seemed fitting somehow. I gave the eulogy. Talked about what he'd meant to me, to my father, to everyone who'd ever needed a friend in a courtroom or a shoulder to lean on. When I was done, we rode out to the cemetery, 100 motorcycles in a single file, escorting our brother to his final rest. That's what community means. That's what my father understood and what Fleming never could. It's not about what you own. It's about who stands beside you when everything falls apart. Tom Hendricks, my neighbor, the one who crossed the street to avoid me during all that mess, he's become a regular at the shop now. Bought himself a used Sportster, brings it in every few weeks for lessons on basic maintenance. I don't charge him for the time. Some debts aren't paid in money. The HOA is under new management. After the scandal, most of the original board resigned or were voted out. The new president, a woman named Patricia Chen, came to see me personally after she took over. "I want to apologize," she said, "for everything the previous administration did. It was wrong, and I'm ashamed it happened under our community's name." I told her I appreciated that. Told her the apology wasn't necessary, but it meant something anyway. "What can we do to make it right?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. "Just be honest," I said. "Run your organization the way it should be run. Protect the neighborhood, don't terrorize it. Remember that the people in those houses are your neighbors, not your subjects." She nodded. We shook hands. And since then, I haven't had a single problem with Oak Ridge Commons. Funny how things work out when people in charge actually care about doing their jobs right. Carla Dominguez, the woman who gave me the flash drive that brought down Fleming, she opened her own bookkeeping business last year. Hired a couple of other women who'd been pushed out of their jobs for refusing to play along with corrupt bosses. They call their company Clean Books Accounting. I've got them doing my taxes now. Seems only fair. Maria Santos, my lawyer, she won some kind of award from the State Bar Association for her work on the case. They wrote it up in the legal journals, called it a landmark example of property rights defense. She framed the article and hung it in her office, right next to a picture of the 53 motorcycles in the parking lot. Sometimes, late at night when the shop is quiet and I'm the only one there, I sit in my father's chair and talk to him. Not out loud, not anymore, but in my head, the way you do with people you've lost. I tell him about the day's work, about the bikes we're building, about the people who come through the door with dreams in their eyes and rust on their machines. I tell him about Marcus, the young mechanic, how he's starting to understand that this job is about more than just tools and parts. How he's learning to listen to an engine, to feel what it needs, to give every job the respect it deserves. I tell him about the letters I still get sometimes, from people who remember Sal Russo, who knew him back in the day, who brought their bikes to him, who still talk about the quality of his work and the strength of his handshake. I tell him we're okay, that the shop is thriving, that his name means something, still means something, will always mean something as long as there's a Russo left to carry it. And sometimes, in the quiet of those late nights, I swear I can feel him there. Not as a ghost, nothing like that. Just as a presence, a warmth, a certainty that the man who built these walls, who hung these photographs, who taught me everything I know, is still with me somehow, still watching, still proud. That's what legacy means. Not buildings or money or the things people can take away. It's what lives on in the people you touched, the work you left behind, the principles you held on to when it would have been easier to let go. Howard Fleming had 6 years to think about that. I hope he used the time well. As for me, I don't need 6 years. I know exactly who I am and what matters. I'm Vinnie Russo, son of Sal, grandson of Marco, descended from a line of men who built things with their hands and kept their word. I own a motorcycle shop in California. Same shop my father built in 1994. Same walls, same workbench, same principles. And every day, when I walk through that door and see the photographs on the wall, the tools in their places, the sign above the entrance that says Russo Iron Works, I remember what it cost to keep this place standing, what my father sacrificed, what my community gave. I remember Murphy and his gasoline can, Fleming and his lawyers, the forged signature and the midnight break-ins and the weeks when it felt like the whole world was trying to tear us down. And I remember 53 motorcycles pulling into a parking lot. Frank DeLuca standing up in that hearing room. Carla Dominguez handing me a flash drive that would change everything. I remember what it feels like to be part of something bigger than yourself. That's the real story, not the trial or the verdict or the money they gave me. The real story is about people showing up for each other, about standing together when it would be easier to look away. That's what my father built, even more than the shop. A community, a family, a network of people who believed in honest work and stood by their friends. Howard Fleming thought he could destroy that with money and lawyers and forged documents. He was wrong. We're still here, still building, still keeping our word. And that, more than anything else, is how this story ends. Not with a bang or a crash or a dramatic confrontation, just with a man in a shop, turning a wrench, building something beautiful, carrying on the work his father started 50 years ago. Some things really are built to last. This shop is one of them. And so, I like to think, am I?